Greetings and welcome back to Switch to Linux. We have an outdoor philosophy. I'm actually kind of indoor on a sun porch because it's a little rainy out today. But hey, I got in front of a window here, so, there's at least some woods behind me. We're going to start a new book today, and we are going to call this, the book is called First Things First. Steven Covey, of course, is one of the great author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. This book is a lot less well known by him. So of course, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is a very good read. This book here, though, will talk about prioritizing. It has co-authors of A. Roger Merrill and Rebecca R. Merrill. And if you notice up here in the corner, there's a nice picture of it is a clock and it is a compass. And I was going to be cool and cute and bring, I have a nice sterling silver pocket watch. I was going to bring that, but, I forgot to do that. And I don't really own a compass anymore because I'm a minimalist. Why do I need that? But regardless, First Things First is really a fascinating book about time management. And time management, particularly, for everybody needs to have an element of time management. But there's a lot of crazy misconceptions, and that's what this book gets to, is addressing some of those misconceptions about what time management actually is. And so we have to keep that in mind as we are going about our study. Now, of course, First Things First is about deciding what things you need to focus on first, and what are your priorities and things. And as you look at and examine different time management programs out there, you'll find a whole lot of you got to make to-do lists, you got to have a calendar, you got to do this, do that, whatever. And the biggest challenge with all of that really is that there are some fundamental principles that get lost in the shuffle. And that's kind of what they talk about. So their entire first chapter is specifically dedicated to examining what is out there in the current market of time management, and talking about the fact that there is another option is needed. So the first chapter here is called Why Many People on Their Deathbed Wish They'd Spent More Time. Wait, I'm sorry. I completely read that wrong. How many people on their deathbed wish they'd spend more time at the office? Of course, that is the old adage. Nobody says they wish they spent more time at the office. It's more time with family. It's more time on the road. It's more time in vacations. More time that's meaningful things. Because when you boil it down, what we in America are kind of forced at doing these days is we're so overworked. Of course, things cost so much. I talked about last week in my talk, America is Doomed, that we are so pulled inside of so many different issues that we're so strapped for time, and we feel like we can never get anything done. And so time management programs come out. And, they start out here with an interesting story, and it begs this question. So, that tomorrow you have a very large, busy day, it's an important day, you're meeting with huge clients, but 3:30 in the morning you get a phone call and there's been a heart attack in the family. What do? Do you say, well, I'm sorry, I don't have time for a heart attack right now. We're just going to go ahead and table that, and I think I can pencil you in on Friday? No, you typically drop everything that you're doing and rush out to the hospital to help with this heart attack, or at least figure it out, because, even if there's nothing you can do, if somebody has a heart attack, they're already in the hospital, they got the doctors, there is nothing you can do, but your state of mind will not let you work, okay? And that's kind of the way it is. When you deal with challenges in your life, it will not work, okay? There's a lot of challenges will not work. So they kind of start out with one of these questions, and there's another story in here about a lady who is challenged because, and this happens a lot in this, not just in America, but in a lot of the modern Western world where, we're talking about equality everywhere, which is a great thing. But then you have women, they'll go out, they'll get their college degrees, they'll have these big high paying jobs, and then they have babies, and then, they're stuck. Do I want to stay home and raise the kid? Do I want to put the kid in daycare? Whatever else you do. And, there was a period of time, and I believe in the European Union, and people are talking about it here, but having a mandatory maternity leave time so that, in reality, you don't want to, push out a baby and go back to work the next day. You really want to spend some time with that young developing child, for at least the first few months or whatever. And so what ends up being the kind of the end all there is, they're talking about this career woman in here who had these deep rigid schedules, and now she's guilty that she has this deep rigid schedule that keeps her from her baby, or her baby keeps her from her deep rigid schedule. And you got to figure out what that balance, what that interplay is there. And it's really different for everybody. I don't think that there's any one thing that is absolutely right for the whole world. Everybody needs to come to their own decisions, their own conclusions on those matters. Then, of course, they introduced the clock and the compass. And the purpose they talk about the clock and the compass is because we are always pulled in this world, especially again to the business literature. You're pulled behind what's your direction, what's your focus. Well, your direction and your focus is kind of like that compass. What's steering you in one direction? But then, of course, we are slaves to the time because we only have a certain number of hours. We have 168 hours in a week. Why is it that some people can accomplish tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff, and other people, they're lucky if they answer an email, And so you have this kind of balance that we all have the same amount of time. We don't all necessarily have the same direction. But regardless, we need a time management strategy that considers both the availability of the time on the clock and one that is going to look at the direction that we have for our life. All right. So then the authors here talk about 3 generations of time management. And these are kind of the generations that we see out there in the literature in some form or another. So they call them these very basic names: first generation, second generation, third generation. Whoop-de-doo. Okay, so the first generation, though, is based on a series of reminders. So in this phase here, you'll have a bunch of things that you need to do, but you don't have any necessary order by which you do them. And the challenge, one of the major challenges with this, and we'll get into all the strengths and weaknesses, is that you're very go with the flow. So you have a bunch of things you need to accomplish, but you don't have any specific structure by which to accomplish them, and so you end up not accomplishing much of anything. And that kind of can become a challenge. So this generation is characterized by simple notes and checklists. Okay, if you're in this generation, you carry around the lists, you refer to them so you don't forget to do things. Hopefully at the end of the day, you've accomplished some of the things on your list. If not, those are on tomorrow's list. It's like you get to the bottom of your list, you're like, hey, okay, I want to accomplish this. I want to accomplish this. So this, and this need to go to tomorrow's list. Why not? So that's kind of what the first generation is. So the second generation is more of planning and preparation. Okay, you have calendars, you have appointment books. You pull out the calendar, you pencil a lot of things into that calendar, and basically it's based on efficiency, personal responsibility, and achievements and goals. So you're planning ahead, you're scheduling things. Basically, this is the guy, he knows what the whole summer is going to look like, and it's January, okay, because he's planned and plotted everything out. So if you're in this generation, you make appointments, write down commitments, identify deadlines, and you know where the meetings will be held. And so basically what ends up happening here is that you keep everything kind of this rigid schedule. And then the third generation is prioritizing, planning, and controlling. So what happens here is not only do you have the list of things you need to do, but you also have the list of all of the schedules, the appointments, all these things. But then this phase takes the calendar a step further. It's not just like we've put stuff in the calendar and now we're just going with the flow to figure out what the calendar is. We're looking at the items in the calendar. We're looking at the things in the to-do list. And then the day in advance, we're talking about prioritizing things and setting up a list. So if you were following the last book we did, The Power of Focus, this is kind of what was in that blueprint plan. We talked about the blueprint in the Be Alert system. So the blueprint was just figuring out what it is you want to do, what it is you want to accomplish, and how to make that work. And that is kind of what they were getting at with the third generation. So we could say that book, it didn't just say create a checklist of things to do, because that's too nebulous. It didn't say write down your appointments. That's too nebulous. It went into the third generation to say you have the appointments, you have the things you need to do. Now you need to prioritize those items and put them where you want to put them. and then figure out what you need to do from there. So basically, we can say that the power of focus was based on a third generation approach to time management. But what these authors are going to argue here by the end of this chapter is that while each of these generations have strengths, there are also a plethora of weaknesses. For example, and this I think happens more often than not in our society. We are this society that is so rushed and so busy. Those of us with kids, especially teenagers, we can't take the time to learn what ails them because we're too busy running from this commitment to that commitment. We got this, we got that. And if there is any time left in the day to actually get something personal, you don't have any time to commit to it. And so there's a quote in here somewhere. I'm not sure if I'll be able to find it again on short notice. Let's see if I can or not. But they said, I think it was before that. I love this quote. I just didn't mark it out. Looks like I'm not going to be able to find it. So basically it was like... oh yeah, here it is. I love it. This is under the efficiency part. In addition to how efficient you can be, so the third generation is based on efficiency. You've planned, you've plotted your entire days down to there. The problem is with your entire days though plotted out, you are too rigid to actually stop and help. So they say here, have you ever tried to be efficient with your spouse or your teenager or an employee in an emotional jugular issue? How'd it go? In other words, crisis! Help, I have a crisis. Sorry, you can't express your deepest feelings. I only have 10 minutes scheduled before this interview. Don't bother me now, son. Take your emotionally broken and bleeding self somewhere else for a few minutes while I finish this to-do item I have on my schedule. A lot of times, I'm going to stop for a moment and talk about something that's kind of on my heart with this because I've done a lot of youth mentoring over the years. And I make myself very available to the kids that I mentor. And the reason that I do that is you do not know when a crisis is going to arise in their life. And if I am so rigid on this hardcore schedule and somebody's like, I have crisis, a crisis can take hours and hours to help resolve. And we don't necessarily need to help solve every single problem we have. But the fact that the matter of the fact though is that most times, particularly if you got teenagers, this will happen with spouses and teenagers, sometimes they just need someone to talk to for a few hours. And if you're so rigid in your schedule, you can't do that. Okay? Now, taking that a step further though, why is it that our teenagers, and sometimes our spouses, but more often I'd apply this to your teenagers, why do they not come and talk to you? Well, you're too busy. You never give them you never give them any amount of time, or you attempt to solve all their problems. Oh yeah, I know that problem. Let's solve it. This is all you need to do. And he's going, well, that sounds easy in paper, but I have no idea how to do that. And when you have to deal with an emotional crisis for a teenager, their world is crushing under them. It's not, but it feels like it. And you need to have more flexibility than that. Now, Generation 1 allows you that flexibility, but too many other things fall through the cracks. Generation 3 is too rigid. Like, no, son, I only have 10 minutes to talk to you right now. And 10 minutes is not enough time in many cases. And we have to keep that in mind as we carry on. So they talk about several different areas of strengths and weaknesses. So look at these different items and think of the time management things you've looked at in the past. How much emphasis was there on control? Controlling the schedule, controlling the calendar, controlling what you need to do. And then there's the efficiency. How effective are you at your tasks? Some things will point to our values. What is the value you want to have? Of course, sometimes the values doesn't reflect the time available for those values. Independent achievement. What is the independent achievement that we're looking for here? And then chronos, of course, means time, Greek word for time. And competence, management. So those are kind of the things. So there's strengths and weaknesses listed here in a nice table. Strengths and weaknesses of first and second and third generation. So I'm going to go ahead and read some of these because I think they're very telling. And it makes you question yourself. What am I doing for time management? How can I improve? And do I need another method of time management? So your first generation has some very specific strengths. You can adapt when something more important arises, okay? So that if you are a teenager with a crisis, you want somebody, and the person, you can go talk to somebody, and you have a first generation, a second generation, and a third generation person to talk to the first generation. He's gonna take all his to-do list and put it on tomorrow's list and clear out the day for you. Okay. The third generation, if it's a heart attack, will be deeply conflicted. Will, out of a sense of duty or obligation, will do that, not out of a sense of what's important in the heart. But they're forgetting that compass. They're so mastered by the calendar, the time. All right. So this person, therefore, is more responsive to people. They're not overscheduled or overstructured. They less stress, and they do track their to-dos. However, there's some weaknesses. They don't really have any structure in their day, which means that they're more prone to watch 15 videos before they actually do their first item on their to-do list. And that can be problematic. So things fall through the cracks, and commitments are either ignored or forgotten because there's really not any calendar written down. They don't tend to accomplish nearly as much as other groups happen to do. And then, of course, they move from crisis to crisis. And that's kind of the thing that when you live your life in crisis mode, broke, desperate, and stupid, as Dave Ramsey calls them, come moving into your spare bedroom, okay? If you're crisis, you're not thinking clearly. And you need to move beyond the level of crisis and come back to what is important. So for you, your first things, if you're a first generation planner, your first things are those things right in front of you, okay? Your second generation tracks commitments and appointments. They are far more accomplished in both their goals and their planning, and they're more effective at meetings. They're more prepared for the presentations and all these. But it leads to putting the schedule over people. So this starts that phase where I got 10 minutes for you, son. I hope you can unveil your heartfelt problems for me in 10 minutes time, because, and then after that, we'll just have to talk about it tonight after dinner if some new TV show doesn't take more of my interest, and or if I don't completely forget and you're too afraid to bring it up again. Okay, so these people will start to emphasize the schedule over the people. More of what you want and not necessarily what you need or what is fulfilling. So you tend to schedule more of those things that you want, not necessarily as much as what you need. So independent thinking, now the challenge is those that they see people in these minds can either be seen as a barrier to goals. So when your son comes in with a crisis, the barrier to your goals, like, I want to complete XYZ. I'm going to tell this fun story. In fact, it's kind of related to how I was starting Switch to Linux, because I created this YouTube channel last year in the month of July somewhere. I think it was late July. I never actually pushed anything live until October. So if you never saw me until October, that's why. I was building up a lot of videos and planning things out. I was planning out my website, doing things. So this young man that I mentor was staying at their aunt's house. They were getting a house built, and it wasn't quite ready yet, and they sold their other house, and he goes out for a run in the woods and lost his way. And so his mom calls me like 8 o'clock at night. I'm like, yeah, is he with you by chance? I'm like, no, I haven't heard from him all day. Or maybe I text him or something. I don't know. Can't remember. I texted him or something maybe that day. Hadn't heard from him though. I was busy doing other things around town, and she's like, that's weird, which is completely out of character. I know a lot of teens are just like, we don't care, we're rebellious, whatever. This kid's not like that. Very good kid. She's like, yeah, I said, okay, well, his notebook around the house. She's like, yeah, his notebook's here. Like, he will not go anywhere without that notebook. I said, no, you need to call the police. And so we convinced her to call the police, and I went over there, and we organized a bunch of other people, and well, end of the line is I was really had my heart set on finishing the Switch to Linux website. It didn't happen that night, okay? Because the people were more important than the priorities in the schedule. So we have to start this whole neighborhood search party to find this kid lost in some state game lands in the middle of nowhere. And we found him. We found him later on that night. But it's just the Generation 2 guy. The people will become a barrier to their goals. You don't want to be that guy. Now, I'm not necessarily first generation. We'll get into where I go a little bit later, but you wanna stop looking at people as either a means to accomplish your goals or a barrier to reach your goals. If that's the way you see people, yeah, watch out. Third generation assumes the responsibility for results. They connect with their values. So this is a person who has evaluated their direction, their values, the core directions they want to go. They plan that in, so they're prioritizing their times and their schedules based upon those values. They increase personal productivity through daily planning, so these are very effective people. They have very high efficiency. They have a very structured, very ordered life. Immanuel Kant, somebody said you could set your clock by his daily walk. He went out for a walk the exact same time every day, so you could set your clock based on that. That's kind of what we're talking about here. And it strengthens skill of managing time and self. So this is a person that is a master of their time, they're a master of their self. But there's a problem with this. This can lead you to believe that you are in control. And if you've lived life long enough, you know you're not in control. In fact, some natural laws will very well take precedence over you. Okay, values clarification, not necessarily aligned with principles that govern. Okay, so that means that your values clarify your direction, not necessarily the natural law of things. So if you have this crazy goal to flap your arms enough time to gain the strength to fly, you're going to find yourself never able to accomplish that goal because your focus and your vision exceeds the natural limits of what your availability is. The power of vision, he's untapped. Daily planning rarely gets past prioritizing the urgent and pressing and crisis management. Meaning that they're also, back to that same thing, managing crises. They're just scheduling the crises in more readily. Okay, this can lead to guilt, overprogramming, and imbalance between roles. So this is the guy that did not finish something on the to-do list because something else took an extra hour and a half. So this is the guy that's always late for dinner and keeps forgetting to call his wife, causing a lot of marital strife. Because they have this difficulty balancing the role between what is work and what is life. Like what is work and what is family. And that's a balance you need to maintain if you're going to be successful. So they're less flexible, less spontaneous, and these skills alone do not produce an effectiveness in leadership. All right, so their first things are set by the urgency and by their values. Okay, the second generation's first things are set. So let's actually look at the first generation's first things are those things that are right in front of you. Second generation's first things are the first things on the schedule. Third generation first things are what is urgent and aligning to your particular value. And so they actually have this quote in here attributed to Albert Einstein. I love this quote. It says, "Significant problems we face cannot be solved by the same level of thinking that created them." There's, of course, a biblical verse, Romans 12, is it 12:2, I think, 1 or 2, I think it's 1, transform yourself by the renewing of your mind so you will know what the will of God is. The key is transforming yourself by the renewing of your mind means you cannot maintain the same thinking you've always had and move forward into the will of God. You have to change some thinking somewhere along the line. So basically what they're saying is because there's some strengths in all these time management skills, if you've studied time management, you've probably were forced into one of those three things in time management or some hybrid therein. And that's what this book is going to present, is a fourth generation of time management that takes a lot of the strengths but leaves out several of the weaknesses. So that's kind of what we're going to do. So they're talking here in chapter 2 about the urgency addiction. So that is what we will do next week, is talk about the urgency addiction. Other than that, check out the book First Things First. I'll go ahead and throw a link through Amazon down below. Also, if you like what we're doing here on this channel, whether you want to show up here for the business tips or the life tips or the Linux or the news, those are the topics I cover. I cover Linux, I cover news, I cover life, I cover business. If you want to help support in one of those things, you can follow me over on Patreon, patreon.com/Tom M. And that way you can find my Patreon link there, and it will also be in the description below. And you can also help support the channel on Amazon. So thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.